Hey, it's Nathan. Before we start, I want you to think about the most dangerous thing in a hotel room. It's not the lock on the door. It's not the stranger in the hallway. It's the thing you cannot see, cannot smell, and cannot hear. And the only warning you might ever get is a person who's paid $11 an hour deciding, in 6 seconds, that your life is worth more than his job. Tonight's story is about a man named Rory Tennant who checked into a beautiful lakeside hotel with his little boy and his in-laws and got handed 2 key cards instead of 1. The second card wasn't a key. It was a warning, whispered by a night clerk who had seen something 4 years earlier that he could never unsee. What Rory did in the next 12 hours, calmly, quietly, without ever raising his voice, is one of the best examples I've ever found of why you stay polite, stay observant, and let the people who tried to bury you dig the hole themselves. There's a lesson in this one about listening to front desk workers, about trusting your own instruments, and about how greed always books the same room twice. Stick around to the end, because the last door that opens in this story isn't opened by a key. Let's get into it. Rory Tennant made his living finding the thing nobody else could smell. He was 38 years old, a combustion diagnostics engineer out of Ottsville, New York, and for 14 years his job had been crawling through boiler rooms and mechanical basements with a pump probe and a gas analyzer, hunting carbon monoxide the way other men hunted deer. Hospitals hired him after failed inspections. School districts hired him when a janitor got dizzy. He had a one-man company, Tennant Air and Flame, a white van with his name on the door, and a reputation across 4 counties for being the guy who found the crack in the heat exchanger everyone else had missed. He liked to tell his trainees the same thing his own mentor had told him. Carbon monoxide is patient. It doesn't break down the door. It waits for you to fall asleep. He also had a 6-year-old son named Huck, who was the entire point of everything else. Huck Tennant was a small, serious boy who wore a toy fire helmet to breakfast, sorted his crayons by warmth of color, and asked questions like whether the moon had a furnace inside it. For 10 months it had been just the 2 of them, because on a black ice morning the previous September, Rory's wife Cecily had spun off County Route 9 on her way to open the flower shop where she did the books, and she had died before the ambulance was even dispatched. There was no mystery in it. Rory had read the accident reconstruction himself, twice, the way he read combustion reports, skid marks, yaw angle, a bald patch of ice under a stand of pines that never got sun. The road had simply taken her. Some machines fail without anyone sabotaging them. He knew that better than most men. It did not make the house quieter at night. What Cecily left behind, besides a boy who now slept with the hallway light on, was money. Rory had never thought of his wife as money, but the paperwork disagreed. There was a life insurance policy through the flower shop's small business plan that paid Rory $400,000. And there was the trust. Cecily's grandmother Mavis had sold 200 acres of orchard land to a developer the year Huck was born, and had skipped a generation out of a farmer's distrust of her own children, leaving $750,000 in trust for Huck Tennant, to be controlled by his surviving parent until the boy turned 25. Rory was the trustee. He touched none of it. He kept fixing furnaces, kept packing school lunches, and kept the trust statements in a fireproof box in the basement, unopened, because opening them felt like agreeing that she was gone. Cecily's family saw the same numbers and did a different kind of math. The Danvers family of Penrose Falls had been, for 2 generations, the kind of family that owned things: a paving company, a strip of storefronts, a marina slip with a boat named after a tax attorney's advice. Cecily's father, Sherman Danvers, was a real estate developer in the sense that he had developed a talent for owing banks money. Her mother, Regina, was the one everyone actually feared. Regina Danvers was 62, silver-haired, church committee polished, and she ran the family's accounts, the family's grudges, and the family's story about itself, with the same iron bookkeeping. When people in Penrose Falls said the Danvers name, they lowered their voices a little, and Regina had spent 40 years making sure they did. Rory had never fit into that family, and Regina had never forgiven him for it. He was a tradesman who showed up to Christmas dinner with clean fingernails and a bottle of wine that cost $14. And worse, Cecily had loved him without asking her mother's opinion first. At the funeral, Regina had stood at the graveside in gray cashmere and told Rory, in a voice like a hand on the back of his neck, that family closes ranks in times like these, and that a working man couldn't possibly raise a boy alone. 2 weeks later, she'd mailed him a brochure for a boarding academy, with a note that said, "We would of course handle the tuition." Rory had thrown it away and said nothing, because his own father had taught him that you don't argue with a leak, you find its source. But he'd started paying attention, because the calls kept coming. Regina wanted Huck for whole weekends, not afternoons. Regina wanted to be added as a contact at Huck's school, and when the school called Rory to confirm, it turned out she'd asked to be listed as guardian, a word she later waved off as a clerical mix-up. Regina's lawyer sent a friendly letter suggesting that, for the boy's protection, the trust might benefit from a co-trustee with, as the letter put it, deeper familiarity with wealth management. Rory declined politely, in writing, and kept the letter. He was a man who documented things. It was the habit of his trade. You don't remember readings, you log them. Somewhere in those months, without ever saying the word out loud, Rory Tennant began keeping a log on his wife's family. What Rory couldn't see from Ottsell was how badly the Danvers empire was bleeding. Sherman's last development, a lakeside condo project called Pinnacle Shores, had stalled with the roads paved and nothing built, and the construction loan on it reset that spring at an interest rate that ate $60,000 a quarter. The storefronts had 2 vacancies and a roof claimed the insurer was fighting. And Regina's ledgers, the real ones, the ones she kept in a green binder behind the china that nobody was allowed to touch, showed a family about 14 months from losing the name it had spent 2 generations buying. Regina did not tell her husband how bad it was, because Sherman broke like wet drywall under pressure. She told the only member of the family she considered useful. Chet Danvers was Cecily's older brother, 44, and the only Danvers who could actually make something with his hands. He'd run a heating and cooling company, Danvers Mechanical, until his temper and 2 lost commercial contracts shrank it to 1 van and a storage unit of tools he hadn't returned. Chet was good, genuinely good, licensed, sharp with combustion systems in a way that would have impressed Rory in another life, and he was bitter in the way only skilled men who blame everyone else can be bitter. He owed a casino boat in Verona more than he owed his suppliers. He had grown up watching his mother solve problems, and he had learned the family's one true craft, which was never once discussed at dinner. When a Danvers problem could not be paid off or waited out, it was arranged. Because there was a precedent. 4 years earlier, Sherman had had a business partner named Orson Pitt, a blunt, cheerful gravel and concrete man who owned 30% of the paving company and had started asking, loudly, for an independent audit of where the equipment reserves had gone. Orson Pitt never got his audit. He died in his sleep at 61, of an apparent cardiac event, in a lakeside hotel called the Windrow, during a partner's retreat that Regina had organized down to the room assignments. The county coroner, processing his 19th case that month, signed it out in 40 minutes. The partnership agreement had a survivorship clause Sherman himself had barely understood when Regina had him insert it. Orson's shares returned to the company at book value, a fraction of their worth. Orson's widow got a casserole from Regina and a check that insulted the man's whole life. The audit died with him. Nobody in Penrose Falls lowered their voice about it, because nobody knew there was anything to lower their voice about. Except one person, a 20-year-old hotel night auditor working his 4th week, who had opened room 312 with a master key on a wellness check at 6:40 in the morning and found a gray-faced man lying in a bed with cheeks the color of raspberry sherbet, a detail he mentioned to a paramedic, who shrugged, and to no one else for 4 years. So in the spring after Cecily died, when Regina Danvers sat at her kitchen table with the green binder and a pot of coffee and looked at the family's 14 remaining months, she did not see a tragedy. She saw arithmetic. Her granddaughterless daughter was gone, and sitting in a raised ranch in Ottsell was a widowed furnace mechanic worth, by her count, $1.15 million the moment he stopped breathing. $400,000 in insurance money he'd parked in a savings account like a peasant, and $750 in trust for a 6-year-old boy who would need a guardian. And guardianship, Regina knew, was just trusteeship wearing a sympathy card. If Rory Tennant died, no court in the county would look past the boy's devoted, respectable church committee grandmother. The Danvers name would be saved by the same instrument that had saved it 4 years before. All the plan needed was for the accident to be the kind no one questions, in a place the family didn't own, with everyone's grief on public display. Regina poured a second cup of coffee and reached for the phone to call her son. Chet said no for 11 days. It's worth saying that, because it was the last thing he ever said no to. He said no in his mother's kitchen, said it in the parking lot of the casino boat, said it with less conviction on the phone at 1 a.m., while a collections man from Verona sat outside his apartment in a parked car with the engine running. What broke him wasn't fear, in the end. It was flattery. Regina told him he was the only one with the skill to make it gentle. Gentle was the word she used, the way you'd describe putting down a dog. Nobody would suffer, she said. The man would go to sleep next to the lake, and the family would be whole, and Huck, she always said the boy's name at exactly the right moment. Huck would grow up a Danvers, with everything that name was about to mean again. Chet hung up, sat in the dark for an hour, and then took a legal pad from his kitchen drawer and started drawing a flue diagram from memory. He'd serviced the Windrow Hotel's pool heater twice, years ago, as a subcontractor. He knew the building's lungs. He knew that room 312 sat directly above the pool mechanical room, and that inside the wall of 312 ran a dead masonry chimney chase from 1961, capped at the roof, abandoned when the hotel converted to sidewall venting, a hollow throat of brick, running from the heater's exhaust collar straight up past the third floor. Some buildings keep their old sins sealed inside the walls. Chet Danvers knew exactly how to unseal one. The pieces went together through the early summer with the quiet efficiency of a family that had done this before. In May, an independent insurance broker in Syracuse named Neil Cutler, a man who had moved paper for Sherman's projects for a decade and asked few questions provided the questions were paid for, wrote a $2 million accidental death policy on the life of Rory Tennant. The application carried Rory's forged signature, traced by Regina from the condolence book page he'd signed at his own wife's funeral, a detail that would later make a courtroom go silent. The premiums flowed from a Danvers LLC, 3 entities removed from the family name. The beneficiary was a family trust with Regina as trustee. Cutler backdated a phone interview that never happened, collected a commission and an envelope, and went to lunch. In June, a guardianship petition for Huck Tennant took shape on Sherman's laptop, complete but unfiled, sleeping in a folder named Estate Misc, its blank line waiting for a date of death. And in the first week of July, Regina called the Windrow Hotel with the warmth she saved for strangers, and explained that her family wanted to spend the anniversary weekend of her daughter's birthday at the lake. She was specific the way grieving grandmothers are allowed to be specific. 2 rooms, adjoining, 3rd floor, lakeside. The corner room, 312, for her son-in-law. Cecily always loved that view, she said. Room 314, for herself and her husband, so the boy could sleep on their side if he got scared at night. Late checkout Sunday. She spelled every name carefully, and the reservation system, which never forgets anything, wrote it all down. The Windrow Hotel had 81 rooms, a lobby that smelled of cedar and lemon oil, and a night auditor named Casper Nye, who had never once been asked his opinion about anything. Casper was 24 now, thin, polite, glasses always a little smudged, the kind of young man guests looked through rather than at. He worked 11 to 7 and his job was reconciliation. Every charge, every card swipe, every work order, every door lock read on the property flowed across his desk in the dead hours. And Casper, who could not afford to finish his hospitality degree, had turned himself into the one person alive who actually read all of it. The Windrow at 3 a.m. was his. He knew the building's sounds the way Rory knew a burner's, and he knew its history, because he had been part of the worst night of it. 4 years on, he still dreamed sometimes of room 312, the master key's click, the too warm air, the big cheerful man from the retreat gone gray and still, with that impossible pink blooming along his cheekbones. Cherry pink, the paramedic had said, packing up. Sometimes hearts just quit, kid. Casper had written one line in his shift log that morning, because writing things down was all the power he had. Room felt overheated, guests coloring strange, and then he had carried it, the way you carry a splinter too deep to dig out. So he noticed. On Tuesday, running the arrivals report for the coming weekend, the name Danvers.Tenant Party of 4 came off the printer, and something in the back of Casper's neck went cold before he consciously remembered why. He pulled the old file, the 2022 retreat. The organizer's name on the group folio, R. Danvers. The dead man's room, 312. The weekend request sitting in front of him, 312, specifically, demanded warmly on the phone for the son-in-law. Casper told himself it was a coincidence, and then Wednesday happened. At 4:15 on Wednesday afternoon, Casper was in early, covering a shift. A contractor in a gray work jacket badged through the third-floor service corridor with a vendor pass, carrying a duffel, and was inside the wall access panel behind 312's closet for 51 minutes. Casper checked the maintenance calendar. No work scheduled. He checked the work order system. An order for rooftop HVAC warranty service had been entered that morning from the front desk terminal while the manager on duty was at lunch, and voided the same evening. Voided orders leave ghosts in an audit trail, and reading ghosts was Casper's entire job. Thursday night, the fire panel ran its automated supervisory check, and the combination smoke and carbon monoxide detector in room 312 returned a fault. 12 minutes later, the fault cleared, reset manually, from the device itself, inside a locked, unoccupied room. Casper sat in the empty lobby at 4 a.m., with the printouts squared in front of him, and felt the splinter move. Someone had been inside the wall of the room where Orson Pitt died, on a ghost work order, 2 days before a man named Danvers checked his son-in-law into that exact bed, and the detector in that room had just been touched. He tried to do it properly. Friday morning, he stayed past his shift to catch the general manager, Sanford Culp, a soft, careful man who ironed his own pocket squares, and he laid the printouts on Culp's desk and made his case in the reasonable voice he'd practiced in the car. Culp listened with the expression of a man being handed a subpoena, then said the sentence that Casper would repeat later under oath. "We do not invent liability for this property, Mr. Nye." He instructed Casper to leave guest families alone, mentioned that the hotel was up for its lender inspection, and put the printouts in his drawer, which was, though Culp didn't mean it this way, the safest evidence storage in the building. Casper walked out to his car and sat in it for a long time. He was 24. He had $1,100, a lease, and a job he needed. Against that he weighed a stranger's face and a 6-year-old with a fire helmet he'd seen in the reservation notes. Child, 6, needs rollaway, likes fire trucks, and the pink cheeks of a dead man only he remembered. Then he went home, slept badly, and came back at 2 in the afternoon for the honor of working a double, because he had decided, with the flat certainty of the quiet, that if nobody above him would stop it, the warning would have to fit inside a keycard sleeve. He typed the note on the office label printer, because handwriting can be traced and jobs can be lost, and he taped it to a blank card, and he practiced the 6 seconds in his head until they were smooth. The Tennant car pulled up under the porte cochere at 4:52 on Friday afternoon. They came in like any family that has learned to perform for its smallest member. Regina gliding, gracious, narrating the lake to Huck. Sherman hauling bags and sweating through the small talk. Rory carrying his son's backpack and his own habit of reading every room he entered. Rory clocked the exits without thinking, the fire panel behind the desk, the humidity line on the lobby windows. What he mostly felt was tired. He had agreed to this weekend against his own gut because Huck's therapist had said rituals help, and because saying no to Cecily's birthday felt like a thing he'd have to defend out loud, and grief had made him, for one more weekend, agreeable. Regina swept to the desk to take charge of her reservation. And here the plan met its first flaw. A flaw sitting behind the desk wearing smudged glasses, because Regina had demanded late checkout at the exact hour that put the check-in itself inside Casper Nye's double shift. Casper processed the party with textbook courtesy, room keys in little cardboard sleeves, pool hours, breakfast till 10. Then, while Regina was performing delight at the lobby fireplace and Sherman was wrestling the luggage cart, Casper slid a second sleeve across the marble to the tall, quiet one, the son-in-law, and leaned in behind the standard patter, and whispered, in 6 rehearsed seconds, with his heart going like a panel alarm, "The second one isn't a key, read it." Then, at normal volume, "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Tennant." And he was already turned, already typing, already invisible again. Rory Tennant had spent 14 years being handed things by nervous men, meter readouts, inspection failures, we didn't want to worry anyone confessions in boiler rooms, and his whole professional value lived in the half-second where his face decided to show nothing. His face showed nothing now. He pocketed both sleeves, thanked the desk, and herded Huck toward the elevator with the family, chatting about the pool. In the elevator, with Regina watching the floor numbers and Huck watching the buttons, Rory flipped open the second sleeve behind his son's backpack like a man checking a receipt. On the card, Under a strip of office tape, a printed label said, "Don't sleep in the room they booked you. Take your son and leave now. Third floor ice room, 10 minutes. If you want to know why." Rory read it twice. He felt the cold arrive. Not panic, he would say later, but the specific cold he felt when an analyzer number climbed past a threshold, the cold of a hypothesis confirming. 10 months of logged phone calls, guardian mix-ups, and co-trustee letters snapped into a shape with edges. The elevator chimed at 3. Regina said something about dinner reservations at 7, downstairs, the whole family. And Rory Tennant smiled at his mother-in-law with the last agreeable smile he would ever give her, and said the 11 words he'd already chosen. "You all go down and get the table. I'll take the luggage up." Then he put his hand on Huck's shoulder and kept it there. The third-floor ice room hummed behind its louvered door, and Casper was there with a clipboard he wasn't using, because a clipboard is a uniform. Up close, he was younger than the desk had made him look, and more scared, and he talked fast and low while Huck, parked in eyeshot at the end of the corridor window with a juice box, counted sailboats. Casper told it in order, auditor style. No theories first. The arrivals report. The 2022 group folio, with R. Danvers as organizer. Room 312 then, and room 312 now. Requested by name for Rory specifically. The ghost work order entered and voided. The contractor in the gray jacket. 51 minutes inside the wall access behind 312's closet. Casper had pulled the corridor camera still, and he showed it to Rory on his phone. And Rory looked at the smeared profile of a heavy-set man in a work jacket and felt the last edge lock into place, because he had stood next to that profile at his own wedding. Then Casper said the part he'd been carrying for 4 years, the wellness check, the too-warm room, the big man gone still, cheeks blooming that impossible cherry pink, sometimes hearts just quit kid, and watched the son-in-law's face finally move, because Rory Tennant knew exactly what cherry pink cheeks on a dead man in an overheated room meant, the way a cardiologist knows what an elephant on the chest means. Carboxyhemoglobin. Textbook presentation. Missed by a rural coroner in 40 minutes and buried under a survivorship clause. The detector fault cleared from inside the room, Casper finished, and the pool heater runs on a timer, and tonight it kicks on at 11. Rory stood in the hum of the ice machine, doing the only math that mattered. Huck is 20 feet away. Dinner is at 7. The heater fires at 11. And then he did the thing that separated him, forever after, from every other man in this story. He did not run. He said, "I need 8 minutes in that room, and then I need the back stairs." He took Huck in with him because he was not letting go of Huck, and he made it a game. "Buddy, sit on the big chair. Don't bounce. We're doing an inspection. You're my chief." And Huck sat with the fire helmet on, gravely supervising, while his father worked. From his work bag, it lived in his van, and his van keys lived in his pocket, and the bag had come up with the luggage because it always came everywhere, the tool bag habit of a man whose own trade had trained him for precisely this room. Rory took the personal CO monitor he'd worn on his belt for 9 years, zeroed it in the hallway, and walked the wall. Ambient, 6 parts per million and climbing lazily. The heater was off. The chase was breathing its residue anyway. At the closet wall, where the old chimney chase ran, 41 parts per million seeping through a fresh, neat, quarter-inch gap where the baseboard met drywall that had been cut and reseated. Clean work, screwed not nailed, a professional's patch job. He photographed it. He unclipped the room's combination detector from the ceiling, and it came down light. Wrong light. He thumbed the test button, dead. He turned it over and slid the cover, and there was no board inside. A gutted shell, the manufacturer's label intact, the guts of it gone, a prop hanging where a guardian used to be. Rory stood on the desk chair holding 4 ounces of attempted murder in his hand, and across the room his son adjusted the fire helmet and asked if they were passing the inspection. "Almost, buddy," Rory said, photographing the shell against the bedspread with the serial number showing. He clipped it back on the ceiling exactly as he'd found it, because he already understood, calmly and completely, that this room was now a crime scene that must not learn it had been discovered. Then he texted Regina. Huck's carsick from the drive, taking him for air and crackers, start without us, propped the Do Not Disturb sign on the handle of room 312, and carried his son down the back stairs Casper had left cracked open with a folded towel. They went out past the dumpsters, into the van, and Rory Tennant drove the 2 miles to the Penrose Falls police station at exactly the speed limit, with his flashers off and his monitor still clipped to his shirt, and walked in through the front door at 6:31 p.m., holding a 6-year-old with one hand and 14 years of professional credibility in the other. The desk sergeant heard hotel and carbon monoxide and reached for the nuisance report pad, and then Detective Nadine Belrose came out for coffee at the wrong moment and caught the tail of it, and Belrose, 16 years on the job, a woman with a caseload full of Lake Town nothing and a good ear for the sound of a witness underselling, took them into a room. Rory did what no frightened civilian had ever done in that room before. He gave a briefing. Chronological, sourced, exhibits numbered on his phone. The guardianship attempts, logged with dates. The co-trustee letter, photographed. The corridor still of the contractor, and the name to go with the profile, Chet Danvers. Her department could pull the mechanical license in 90 seconds. The gap at the baseboard, the meter readings with timestamps, the gutted detector with its serial number. The dead partner 4 years ago in the same room with textbook CO lividity signed out as cardiac. The survivorship clause, and the heater timer set for 11 o'clock tonight, with his in-laws currently ordering appetizers under the room where they expected him to die. Belrose looked at the photos for a long time, and then she said the thing that made Rory finally sit down. My first year on this job, I took the call on Orson Pitt. Something about that room bothered me for a week. I could never say what. Rory slid his phone across the table and said, 41 parts per million with the heater off. That's what bothered you. By 7:40 she had a county judge on the phone. By 8:15, Rory had made the one call of his own that mattered. To Quincy Slater, Deputy State Fire Marshal, who had co-taught a combustion safety course with Rory for 3 winters and owed him nothing but believed him instantly, which was worth more. Quincy was in his truck with his data loggers before the call ended, and at 9:05, in Sanford Culp's office, a search warrant hit the Windrow Hotel like a change in air pressure, and Culp, gray as his pocket square, opened his drawer and handed over Casper's printouts and began cooperating so fast he nearly cooperated himself into an obstruction charge for the drawer. What happened next happened the way Rory's mind worked. Quietly, in the right order, with everything logged. The 3rd floor was cleared under cover of a plumbing failure. 11 guests moved with apologies and vouchers. No sirens, no lobby drama. While the Danvers family sat at a window table downstairs, watching the kitchen send out a birthday dessert Regina had pre-ordered for a dead woman. Quincy Slater went into the pool mechanical room with 2 technicians and found the work signed like a confession, the heater's exhaust collar cracked open and rerouted with a T into the base of the 1961 Chase, the Chase's roof cap sealed from below with foil tape and foam, the whole assembly reversible in 20 minutes by anyone who knew where to look, a machine for filling a brick throat with carbon monoxide and pouring it into the wall of room 312. Calibrated loggers went into 312, 314, the corridor, and the Chase itself. The gas supply got a marshal's lockout the family couldn't see. And then, because Belrose wanted the timer to testify, they let the clock run. At 11 p.m., the pool heater called for heat and fired against Quincy's hidden lockout for 11 recorded seconds before its own safety tripped, and the loggers in the sealed, empty, guarded room 312 caught the breath of what was meant for Rory, a spike arriving through the wall gap right on schedule. Upstairs of nothing, in room 314, Regina Danvers texted her son at 11:04. He's not answering his door. Chet texted back, asleep. That's the point. Go to bed. The phones were already being mirrored under the warrant. Belrose read the exchange at 11:06 and put both phones on the same evidence timeline as the logger spike. 11 seconds of furnace fire and 2 text messages, stitched together by timestamps into the spine of a murder conspiracy. Chet came back at 1:50 in the morning. He came because the heater's control fault was showing on the remote app he'd wired to the mechanical room. His tamper depended on the heater actually running, and the lockout read to him like a tripped sensor he could force. He parked the van behind the dumpsters, badged the service door with the vendor pass that should have been dead, walked into the pool mechanical room with a headlamp and a tool roll, and had the heater's control panel open, gloved hands inside it, when the lights came on. There were 4 officers, Quincy Slater, and a camera that had been running since 10. On the floor of Chet's van they found the drilled-out flue collar bolts, the foam gun, a photocopied 1988 blueprint of the Windrow's chimney chases, and, in a zip bag like a trophy he'd been too smart to keep and too Danvers to throw away, the circuit board of a combination smoke and CO detector, serial number matching the shell hanging in room 312. Chet Danvers, who had said no for 11 days, said nothing at all now, which no longer mattered. At 7:50 that morning, after a night of unanswered knocks, Regina Danvers used the spare key she was never supposed to have, cut from the adjoining room stock by a bribed housekeeping supervisor 2 days earlier, one more small crime on the pile, and let herself into room 312, wearing dish gloves at 8 in the morning, and walked straight past the bed to throw open the Lakeview window, airing out a room she believed was full of poison and her son-in-law's body, and only then turned around, gloves on, window wide, alibi arranged on her face, to find the bed empty, a state fire marshal's data logger blinking on the nightstand, and Detective Nadine Belrose sitting in the desk chair, watching her, having watched all of it. And the detective said, in the flat voice of a woman closing a 4-year-old file, "Mrs. Danvers, the window's a nice touch. We got it on camera. Would you like to sit down?" They took the family in 3 directions in 3 cars, and the architecture came down the way rotten buildings do, all at once, from the paperwork out. Neil Cutler lasted 1 business day. Confronted with a $2 million accidental death application bearing the signature of a man who provably never took the phone interview, the broker traded everything. The forged signature Regina had supplied on tracing paper, the LLC that paid the premiums, the backdated interview notes, and, because Cutler kept receipts on his clients out of professional cowardice, a recording of Regina asking whether double indemnity covered inhalation accidents. Sherman Danvers, separated from his wife for the first time in 40 years, folded before his second interview, wept through a proffer session, and gave them the green binder, the estate misc folder, with the pre-drafted guardianship petition for Huck, and the sentence that headlined every newspaper in 3 counties. "She told me it was just estate planning gone a little further." On Chet's burner phone, recovered from a magnet box under the van's wheel well, the thread with his mother went back 11 weeks, and included, 4 days before check-in, the message that removed every escape hatch a defense lawyer might have built. Furnace at 11. Keep the boy on our side of the door. The boy, Huck, whose bed in 314 had been arranged by his grandmother on the safe side of a poisoned wall, sleeping arrangements as premeditation, grandmotherly love as an exhibit sticker. And Orson Pitt finally got his audit. Belrose reopened the 2022 file within a week, and it turned out the county hospital had done what underfunded institutions accidentally do best, kept everything. A retained admission blood sample, drawn during the futile resuscitation attempt and frozen in a research archive, came back from the state lab at 62% carboxyhemoglobin, a number so far beyond survivable that the pathologist who read it called Belrose at home. The 2022 group folio showed Regina assigning Orson to 312 by name. A subcontractor invoice from that same spring, pulled from the Windrow's ancient files, showed Danvers Mechanical servicing the pool heater 6 weeks before the retreat. Casper's 4-year-old shift log, room felt overheated, guests coloring strange, entered evidence with its author's initials, the only honest document produced by anyone in the Danvers orbit in half a decade. The medical examiner amended the death certificate from natural causes to homicide, and Orson's widow, who had spent 4 years apologizing to people for her grief because the family had made even that feel excessive, stood in the parking lot of the state lab and asked Belrose to say the word again. Just the word, and Belrose said it. Murder. The survivorship clause that had saved the Danvers name in 2022 became the motive exhibit that ended it in 2026. The same piece of paper doing both jobs, 4 years apart. The legal end came fast, because everyone was selling and the market for loyalty had crashed. Chet took a deal, testimony against his mother in the Pitt murder in exchange for the state dropping the death-qualified count against him, and sat in a courtroom describing flu teas and chase caps with a tradesman's terrible precision while his mother watched him the way you'd watch weather. His deal still cost him 25 years, 2 counts of attempted murder for the Windrow weekend, because the district attorney, a methodical woman named Lenora Petch, charged the wall itself, poison pushed toward a room with a child booked next door, is depraved indifference toward the child too, and the jury agreed. Sherman pleaded to conspiracy and fraud, drew 8 years, and testified against his wife with his eyes closed, as if he could apologize and cooperate at the same time. Neil Cutler surrendered his license, took 3 years, and was last seen teaching an ethics seminar as a condition of sentencing, which even the judge found funny. Regina Danvers went to trial, because empresses do. She wore gray cashmere for 4 weeks, and her lawyers called the case circumstantial, and then Petch played the 11 seconds of furnace fire next to the 11:04 text messages. Put the dish gloves and the window on the courtroom screen. Put the condolence book tracing under a document examiner's camera, and put Casper Nye on the stand, where he answered every question in reconciled, time-stamped order and then asked why he'd risked his job for a stranger, polished his glasses and said, "I reconcile the night audit." Room 312 never balanced. The jury convicted her of first-degree murder for Orson Pitt, conspiracy to commit murder for Rory, and attempted murder, and the judge, noting that she had weaponized her own grandson's sleeping arrangements, sentenced her to life without parole, plus consecutive numbers that only mattered as arithmetic of contempt. She never once looked at Rory. Rory looked at her the whole time, not out of hatred, he told Nathan later, but the way you watch a sealed combustion chamber through the sight glass, to confirm the fire stays where it belongs. There was one more report Rory needed, and it had nothing to do with the trial. In the middle of everything, quietly, he paid a private reconstruction firm to rerun Cecily's accident. Because once you learn your wife's family kills for ledgers, September on County Route 9 stops being settled. The firm took 11 weeks and came back with the same physics as the first report. Ice, shade, yaw, no brake tampering, no second vehicle, nothing. The road had simply taken her. Rory read it in his driveway with the engine off and cried for the first time since the funeral, because there is a specific grief in learning that the universe, unlike your in-laws, wasn't out to get you, that some losses are just weather. He went inside and finally opened the fireproof box and read every trust statement, because the money was clean now, and hiding from it had stopped meaning anything. The civil suits moved the rest. The $2 million policy dissolved back to the insurer. The Danvers assets went to auction, and the first check cut from the forfeiture fund went to Orson Pitt's widow, hand-delivered by Belrose, who had asked for that errand. The second funded something the state fire marshal's office named, over Rory's objection, the Pitt Protocol. Mandatory integrity audits of detector hardware in every transient lodging property in the state, spot-checked, serial verified, because a detector that hangs on a ceiling with no board inside is a lie told at the exact height where sleeping people believe things. Quincy Slater runs the program. Its first civilian hire, an investigations intake analyst with a gift for finding voided work orders, is a 24-year-old former night auditor who now owns, framed above his desk, a blank hotel key card in a cardboard sleeve. Sanford Culp resigned before the lender inspection he'd been so worried about, which went fine, because the Windrow's new owners had nothing to hide and a strange kind of fame, the hotel where the clerk caught it. The new general manager tried to give Casper a plaque in the lobby. Casper asked for the plaque to say something useful instead, so it hangs by the front desk and reads, in small brass letters, "If something feels wrong, tell us. We will not call it inventing liability." Room 312 doesn't exist anymore. It and 314 were gutted to the brick, the chase filled with concrete, floor to cap, and rebuilt as one bright family suite with, at Rory's paid insistence, 3 separate carbon monoxide detectors, which the staff privately call the Tennant Suite, and which Huck, who has now stayed in it twice and knows nothing yet about why, rates 5 stars because the new tub has jets. A year and a week after the check-in, on what would have been Cecily's birthday, Rory took a table at the Windrow's restaurant by the window. Him, Huck, Orson's widow, Quincy, Belrose off duty, and Casper Nye, who tried to sit at the end and was moved by unanimous vote to the middle. Huck, 6 turning 7 and a person who plans ahead, had made everyone place cards, and under Casper's, he had hidden a drawing of a key card, crayoned gold, with block letters that took him 2 nights, good for 1 dinner with us. Forever, not a key. Casper Nye, who reconciles everything, is reported to have left that one unbalanced on purpose. So that's the story of Rory Tennant, and I've been thinking all week about what actually saved his life, because it wasn't luck. 3 things, and none of them were dramatic. First, he documented. Months before anything happened, he was logging phone calls and keeping letters, not because he knew, but because his trade had taught him that you don't trust memory, you trust records. When he finally sat across from a detective, he didn't bring a feeling. He brought a file. If something in your life smells wrong, start writing it down today. You'll either waste some paper or save your life, and that's the best bad trade I know. Second, he stayed calm when it counted, and I want to be precise about what calm meant. It didn't mean fearless. It meant he understood that panic is loud and information is quiet, and he chose to keep collecting information, 8 more minutes in that room with a meter, when every instinct said run. Calm is a skill. You build it before the day you need it. And third, maybe the real one, somebody nobody ever looked at decided to look out for him. A night auditor. $11 an hour. He saw the pattern because seeing patterns was his whole invisible job, and he risked the only livelihood he had for a stranger with a kid, and he did it with a label printer and 6 seconds of courage. There are Casper Nyes everywhere. The desk clerk, the school custodian, the billing tech who notices. Be good to them. Listen when they whisper. And maybe once in a while, be one. If your gut and your paperwork both say something's wrong, say it out loud to someone who can act, even if a man with a pocket square tells you to stop inventing liability. One practical thing before you go, and I mean tonight, carbon monoxide gives you almost no warning. No smell, no color, just sleepiness, headache, and then nothing. $20 buys a travel CO detector that fits in a shoe. I keep one in my bag now, every trip, because of this story. Check the detector in your hallway when you get up to get water tonight. Press the button. If it doesn't beep, that silence is the loudest thing in your house. If this one kept you up, share it with someone who travels. Subscribe if you want more stories where the quiet guy wins, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Nathan. Sleep with the detector working.